You might have to, there we go.
Yes, you see Google?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, all right. So what we want to do, if Helen, you have this in front of you and Leanne, you don't, but what we're going to do is navigate to Google Drive, and I use Chrome as my browser anyway. Boy, this is annoying. Let me see if I can minimize that. Okay. That'll be a little bit, sorry, you guys were going down the side and it was hiding most of my desktop, some of my desktop. Anyway, we're going to navigate to Google Drive and then to, and we're going to create a new Google Sheet and just talk about some terminology. So I use Google Chrome anyway. You don't have to, you can use any browser you want. If you don't use Google Chrome, you won't come up in a screen like this, but then you'll have to go to Google and then you'll get to a screen, something like this. It may not have, can you see me moving my cursor?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, it may not have these icons down here, but you can get to Drive. If you don't have it here, you can get to it up here by clicking or, okay, well now I can go back, or you can get to it over here and find Drive over there. So either way, you launch into Google Drive if you haven't been there before, and my Drive, I've got some structure in my Drive. I have an Art Plus directory, and in my Art Plus directory, I've prepared some things for this course. So I'm going to work from here, but wherever you work from, when you get into Drive, you want to create a new Google Sheet. So this new button will allow you to create Google Docs, which is like a Word document, Google Sheets, which is like an Excel document, Slides is like PowerPoint, Google Forms is what we use when we enter label information. So start a new Google Sheets, and this is what a new Google spreadsheet looks like. Now, way back when spreadsheets were first introduced, a spreadsheet was a single sheet just like this. Somewhere along the line, it was probably Microsoft Excel that started allowing multiple sheets inside a spreadsheet, and they called their what used to be a spreadsheet a workbook, and and then individual sheets inside that workbook were worksheets. So terminology wise, a Google spreadsheet is like an Excel workbook, and a sheet, notice we're looking at, you only look at one sheet at a time, but we're looking at sheet one, and that's like an Excel worksheet, okay? This spreadsheet is untitled right now, but if I go back to my course, it didn't show up yet. Okay. So I'm going to name this. I thought it would show up, in my Google Drive. It will eventually. So right now, this is an untitled spreadsheet. I can give it a name, which will become the file name in Google Drive. So I will call this first spreadsheet. And now it's named. Now it says last edit was only seconds ago. If I look back on Google Drive, there it is. It's right there. So one thing, I might as well say it up front, is there is no file save option. You don't save per se in any Google Documents or Google Sheets or anything else. Everything is saved automatically for you. If you're using Microsoft Excel or something else, you need to be aware that you need to save periodically or certainly at the end. So anyway, in Google Sheets, everything is just saved automatically as you go, okay? So this is like I said, we're just looking at one sheet. You can add sheets. There's a little plus sign here. And the next sheet that you add will be called sheet 2. And if you add another one, it would be sheet 3. But you can name these also. You don't have to, stick with sheet 1, 2, or 3. So to name it, you can go down here and right click and bring up this context menu. Or even easier, maybe, is use this little drop down box. It brings up the same context menu, and you can rename it to a better name. Whatever. So you can name your sheet, you can name your document. All right, you can create as many sheets as you need. If you look at Jay's, accounting files, he's got sheets way out. You can get to those sheets more quickly sometimes, with this menu here. So you can get to sheet 2, and that became option, or you can go back to sheet 1. Okay, so again, still just some terminology. Spreadsheets are made up of rows and columns. Rows are numbered. They're labeled with numbers. There's 31 rows available right now, but if I scroll down, you can see there's a lot more. I don't need to scroll all the way to the bottom. There's 1,000 of these rows initially. If you need more, you can add more. Columns are labeled with letters initially. So 26 letters, as you might guess, there are 26 columns initially up to Z, but you can add more. If I right click on this column, I bring up a context menu again, and I can insert another column either to the left or to the right. It doesn't matter when they're empty. It might matter if you're trying to add in the middle of some data. But if I insert, even though I insert to the left, notice that it inserted a new column, but renamed it to Z. So it keeps that order, A through Z. And the new one is actually labeled AA. The next one would be AB, then AC, up to AZ, and then it would be BA and BB and BC. So it can go on for quite a while. The limitation, as far as I understand it, is not really with the number of rows or the number of columns. It's that you can have 1 million cells inside of a spreadsheet, meaning if you've got more than one sheet, all together combined, they can add up to 1 million cells. Now, initially, we're starting with 26,000 cells, so there's lots of room for expansion, okay? All right, these cells that I'm referring to are the intersections of a row and column. And in order to, these cells need to be able to be named or referred to, especially when we use formulas. Cells contain data. They can contain numbers, they can contain text. So numbers, text, and hopefully you spell better than I do. And they can contain formulas, and formulas are kind of the magic of spreadsheets. Spreadsheets come from the accounting world, from ledgers, where people used to keep their books on physical ledgers and books, and they would pencil in or put in pencil their inventories and their quantities and their prices of each item and so forth. And these cells out here would typically depend on values and multiplications and calculations from the contents of cells over here. And if something over here changed, well, you had to change that, but you also had to go and recalculate everything by hand and change everything by hand. And back sometime in the 1980s, I think his name was Mitch Kapoor, invented Lotus 123, was the very first spreadsheet, if my history is correct. And it was magical because instead of, he would put his data in here, but for all these calculations, he would put in formulas. And then if something changed, you just had to change one cell someplace and everything just flowed through. All the other changes just happened automatically. And that's the magic of a spreadsheet. So these cells, in order for those formulas to work, these cells need to be referenced, and the form of the reference is column row. For instance, this number 3 is in cell A3, okay? There's A1. That number 3 is in cell A3. The text is in cell A4, all right? This cell down
Vince, move your cursor up to the 3 so that cell is highlighted.
Okay, that 3 is A3. And notice that the row and the column kind of shade a little bit to help you. This cell out here is E17. Okay, so that's the,
Point out, Vince, point out that up here in the upper left, there's a cell that shows that reference.
oh, okay, yes,
E17, yeah.
yes, okay, so the address, whatever cell you happen to be on right now is showing up right there, C9. So you can see it by the shading, or you can see it just right there in the address. What's that drop-down box, Jay? Sheet 2. All right, don't know. So now I clicked on A8. At any rate, these references, you know, A8 or C8 are relative references. And there's another kind of reference, and we're not going to talk a whole lot about this tonight at all. It's not important. It'll be more important next time when we talk about formulas. But the other kind of reference is called an absolute reference. And here's the difference. In a formula, when I refer to a cell, if I refer to it the normal way as just A1 or B3 or whatever, a relative reference, when I copy that formula from one cell to another, those references will all change automatically. And most of the time, that's what you want to do, but not always. So there's something called an absolute reference, and you use a $ to fix the row and or the column. Okay, so real quick example. If I type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here, the simplest formula that I can think of.
I need help here a second. My whole screen is bouncing around. Is that you or me? Have I got a problem here or what's going on? My whole screen is going like all over the place.
Oh, I don't know, Leanne.
Do you see me bouncing in and out with the picture? See, I see my picture, then I don't see my picture, and the whole thing is like going everywhere.
Well, let me see.
I don't think it's Vince because I see his screen steady.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't, and I actually see two screen or a screen and a little more of another screen. So if you see me pop off, I have some kind of technical difficulty yet with this stupid internet, and I'll have to just take it when it's recorded.
First,
Oh.
first I'll try going off and coming back on to see if
Okay, I'll try that because this is making me nuts.
okay.
Oh God, I don't
Okay.
even know how to get out of here.
Just leave the meeting and then,
I'm trying.
Okay, so I just put in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here. The simplest formulas begin with an equal sign. The simplest formula I can think of is just a reference to another cell. So if I type in here equals, and then I point to this cell, notice it filled in as equals A1. So it's referring to that cell as a relative reference. If I hit enter, I'm going to ignore this autofill suggestion. It's suggesting what it thinks I want to do. And I do want to do that, but I want to do it the hard way. So this is the number 1. Notice up here in the formula bar, it tells me that's the number 1. This is not. It says number 1 here, but up in the formula bar, it points to A1. And now if I change this to 29, that changed also. Okay, so that's kind of what I mean by the magic of formulas. I'm going to put it back to a 1 for now, but if I copy this formula down here, so I can do that with a Control-C if you use Windows or Command-C if you use a Mac, and then go down here and select these cells, and I'll talk more about selecting cells in just a moment, and say Control-V, notice that the formula adjusted. This one now says equals A2, and this one says equals A3, and this says equals A4 and equals A5. And that's probably what you want to do most of the time, but maybe you don't. Maybe what I really want to do is always just in a formula. I might always want to multiply this cell, the contents of this cell, by the contents of this one. Okay, so if I type in a formula here that says equals, and I say the contents of this cell times the contents of this cell, and hit enter, I get 1 times 5 is 5, which is fine. But now if I copy this, Command C, copy it down, Command V, that doesn't look right. What I was expecting, I think, was 2 times 5 should be 10, and 3 times 5 should be 15. And what happened was it adjusted my formula, A1 times B5, and A2 times B6, and A3 times B7. I didn't want it to adjust the formula that time. So what I want to do is, instead of A1 times B5, I want to make that say $B $5. That's still 5. But now if I copy this down here, I get what I was expecting to get. So I'm sure that we will be talking a whole lot more about relative and absolute references later. I just wanted to talk about the terminology, but without any kind of example whatsoever, the terminology didn't mean anything. So hopefully it means something to you. Sometimes you want to, sometimes, most of the time, you want those cells, those formulas to adjust as you copy them. Other times you don't. So that's the difference with those references. Okay. Now, moving, a range of cells. Here is a range of cells. A range of cells might be A1 to C5. That would be a range of cells, and the way it's referred to in a formula is with a colon between them. So A1 colon B12 is this. A1 to B12 would be that range of cells. I picked that because that's what's in my notes, A1 to B12, okay? So a range is contiguous. So if I want to select a cell or a range of cells, there's a couple of ways to do it. If I want to select any single cell, I just click into it. So if I want to, if I click into that, I have selected F8. To select a range of cells, I can click into a cell and then just drag my mouse down and over or whatever, and I've selected that range of cells. And notice over here, it gives me the range, F8 colon H20. Okay, so those are the references. The other way to select a range of cells is click the first cell that you want. And if it's a big range, maybe it's down several, scroll down a little bit, before you select the next cell, hit the shift key and then select the second cell at the end of the range. And now I've selected that whole thing. So click and drag works fine if it's relatively small. If it's a larger range that you want to select for some reason, you can left click once, then hold down the shift key and left click again, and you'll select everything in between there. Okay. I can select multiple cells that are non-contiguous. And the way to do that is with the command key or the control key. If I select a cell and then hold down the command key or the control key, select another cell, I've selected both of them. If I hold down the control key again and select another one and another one and another one, all the while holding down the control key, I can select multiple but non-contiguous cells. Okay. Entering data or editing data or deleting data in a cell. If the cell is empty, the way you enter data is you select it and you start to type. and you can type in numbers, you can type in text, you can type in whatever you want. But notice that numbers are right, we'll talk about this in a moment, but numbers are right justified, text is left justified. But you can type in numbers or names or formulas, okay? That's a single cell, okay? To delete data in a cell, you select the cell or a range of cells and hit delete. And that data all goes away, okay? To modify data in a cell, there's two ways really. One is select the cell and notice whatever's in the cell shows up here in the formula bar, and I can edit it up here. I can add to it names of, I can edit it there, or an alternative is I can double click in the cell itself, and again, I get a chance to move my cursor any place I want, okay? I don't know what to do.
Just backspace.
I'll just delete some stuff. Okay, so I can edit the contents of cells, you know, both of those different ways, up in the formula bar or in the cell itself by double clicking. I can modify the row height and the column width. I know one thing I want to do is if I have this cell, and maybe what I want to do is say people of, and now I definitely want to put in a new line. If I just hit enter to put in a new line, that doesn't work. That takes me to the next cell. So if I double click in there and hit command and enter or return, I get a new line. People of APG. And notice what happened to the row height. The row height adjusted to fit the data. And that's because all of these row heights, if I click in here, click on the row and right click, I can resize the row down here in this context menu. And notice that right now it's set to fit to data. That's generally what you want. It's a good thing for rows, but it doesn't have to be that way. I can specify a new row height if I want to. The default is 21 pixels. I can make it 50 pixels, and I make the row even bigger. I can also adjust row height simply by selecting a row and holding down my left mouse button and dragging. And I can make a row bigger or smaller that way. Okay, same thing with columns. I can select a column, make it bigger, or make it smaller. Okay, or especially for those with OCD, if I wanted to make, like when we do a calendar, I want all my calendar rows and columns to be about the same size. So I can select a range of columns by selecting one, holding down the key, the mouse key, and select the range, and then choose this drop-down menu here or right click and say resize columns B through E. And I can set the column width to be 200. The default is 100, say okay. And now all of those columns are exactly the same size. Okay, so modifying row height and column height, two different ways, drag or use that context menu. The other thing is there's an undo function, which is just always a good thing because it lets you experiment. It lets you not be afraid to do something, because if what you try to do doesn't work or isn't what you intended, you can just undo it. The undo button for Google Sheets, and probably almost universal, is Control Z. So if I do a Command Z, I undid all those column adjustments. If I do a Command Z again, I undid the row adjustments. There was also a undo button up there. And that undid some more stuff. The only thing I wish that Google Sheets would do is I wish it would tell you what you're undoing. Sometimes like Lightroom will tell you that you were undoing a particular adjustment. Even up here in the edit menu, the undo doesn't tell you what you're undoing, but you can undo and you can redo. Okay, so don't be afraid to try something if you don't know what you did, or if you're uncomfortable, if you did the wrong thing, you can just always undo. Okay. On to the next page. What we're going to do really is just talk a whole lot about this bar, this shortcut. All these buttons up here are shortcuts, and most of these have to do with formatting and the format menu. Okay, so most of these are just duplicated. You can either, there's a lot of items that you can, a lot of things you could do either with the menu or with a shortcut button, one or the other. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to open up a demonstration spreadsheet to work on this. So is that up for everybody, the demonstration spreadsheet?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, okay. So going over from the beginning of this, we talked about the undo button, the redo button. This is how we will print the spreadsheet eventually when we get to that. This is a paint format, a format painter, which lets you just copy the format of cells or a range of cells to another cell or range of cells. Personally, I always have mixed results with this one. I seldom use it. If you use it and it works for you, wonderful. The idea is you select a cell that has a format, like this cell is already formatted as a %. It tells you that here. So the idea is you can select that. You can click the paint format and you can click someplace else and hit enter. And now this should be formatted as a %, and it's not. So
Vince, I find this most useful if you're formatting for color or bold or italic or something like that,
okay,
something like that.
okay. And like I said, I never really tried to figure out why it seems to sometimes work for me and sometimes not. I just don't use it. If it works for you, then great.
I use it all the time.
Okay. All right. So maybe you can cover that more when you do yours. Okay. This is just the scale that you're looking at. You can zoom in and make your view big. You can make it much smaller. So that's just a way to zoom in and out. Okay. Here is a way to format a cell as currency. If I enter a 3 here and then choose this cell and format it as currency, it becomes $3. Okay. Here is a way to format a cell as a %. If I format that same cell as a %, it becomes 300%. Number 3 is 300%. If I have something already formatted as a %, this column this is already formatted as a %, and I type in 6, meaning 6%, it shows up as 6%, which is what I want. The real number there, if I put in equals this, notice it's really 0.06. So, percent is a little bit strange because if I've pre-formatted an empty cell as % and then type a number into it, it becomes 30%. But if I enter a number, if I, what happens up here is the default is automatic. If I enter up here the number 2, oops, sorry about that. If I enter up here the number 2, then what I've done is here I'm copying that reference. Anything in here gets copied here, but as plain text, not as an automatic number. Here it's a number, here it's a percent, but notice the number 2 is 200%. So the percent one, if you pre-format it and start entering numbers, you can enter a 6 as 6%, and it will divide by 100. If it's already formatted and you refer to another cell or copy into it, it becomes, the number stays the same and it's represented as a percent based on the original number. So 2 is 200%. Scientific is for very large numbers, like the distance from here to the sun, very small numbers, the size of an electron. If you're familiar with it, Google Sheets does scientific notation. If you're not, we artists rarely use that, so don't worry about it. Currency is, as you expect, it has a $sign, has 2 decimal places. Remind me about decimal places in a minute. Currency rounded is rounded without decimal places. So if I type in 0.4, then it's rounded down to 0, okay? 0.6 will round up to $1. So it's rounded currency, okay? Accounting looks pretty much like currency, except the $sign is way out there. The difference with accounting and financial is negative numbers. If I put in negative 500, then in accounting terms, negative numbers are shown in parentheses, okay? So if you're a true accountant, that's what you want. Notice dates and times are really kind of strange, especially with what we've done so far. The number 1 shows up as 12/31/1899 at 12 a.m. at 12 a.m. in the morning, right at the beginning of the day. As a date time is 12/31/1899 at 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. The duration is 24 hours. As far as Google Sheets is concerned, the beginning of time, not necessarily, but the time it chooses as the origin is 12/30/1899 at 12 a.m. When I type in that negative number, notice what happened. I ended up going backwards from 12/30 back to August of 1898, okay? Google Sheets represents time as a decimal number and a decimal number. The whole number part of it refers to the number of days since 12/30/1899, and the decimal part of it, the fractional part of it, is time after, notice that 0.6, it's the time after midnight. So 0.4 is 9:36 a.m. By the time I get up to 0.6, it's 2:24 p.m. All right. Not that you need to worry about any of this. There's lots of ways to format dates and times. I just kind of wanted to show you. Sometimes it gets crazy if you have something formatted as a date and time and it ends up losing its format or showing you as a more general format. It looks very strange. If I type in, the other thing is if I type in a date, 5/17/2021, then shows up as a date just fine. A time, since I didn't put in a time, it chose 12 a.m. and there's the date time. And this is the duration, which essentially represents the number of hours since 12/30/1899. And as a number, this really represents the number of days. It's days and then the time. So lots of ways to default to show date and time. What I said about decimal point, back to the bar here. Currency and percents we kind of went over. Moving decimal points. If I choose this 2, I can have less decimal points or more decimal points. Okay, and that's the easiest way, I think, to change the number of decimal places. And then more formats is the same list that you see when you choose the format command. Okay, so either choose the format command or just choose more formats. There's number, there's percent, scientific, accounting, everything that we've shown so far, date, time, and then there are more formats. There's more currency formats, which are things like the euro or Japanese yen. There's more date, time formats. Look at all the ways you can format dates and times. August 5th, Tuesday, August 5th, 1930, 08, 05, August 5th, 1930. So Tuesday, August 5th, 1930. And if these choices aren't enough, you can customize your date and time any way you want by, day, month, year, hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, AM, PM, or 24-hour clock, or duration is elapsed time, elapsed minutes, elapsed seconds. So there's lots of ways to format dates and times, and there are a ton of formulas and functions to manipulate dates and times, which we'll probably get to a little bit, at least later. Okay. So I think that's it for formatting numbers. The other ways to format things, let me do this. Here is some text. Okay. I wanted to have something that was bigger than my cell. But before we get to cell wrapping, I don't need, the default font is Arial 10, but I can change the font to be anything. I can even change it to be barcodes, actually. I can make it kind of, scripted. I can change the font size to be larger. Okay, so I could change font and I can change font size by, these two things here. I can make it bold. I can make it italicized. I can make it crossed out. Doesn't show up as much. I can change the color. Okay, I can change the fill color or the background color. Notice what's happening here. This is the only cell that contains the data. Okay, this cell is empty. And so the fill color didn't change. Okay, all the data is here, and that's the only one with the fill color. I can put borders around the cell or around a group of cells. If I select multiple cells, right now there are no borders, but I can have full borders. I can change the thickness of those borders. Okay, I can change the colors of those borders. So there's lots of formatting options here. And let's see, what else? Up here, I'm going to choose this whole row and talk about, we're not going to talk about merging
Wait,
cells.
Vince,
Yes.
before you go on, show wrap text. While you're on that, you have a longer text that doesn't fit in that cell.
I am. I was just going to get to it in the progression of things here.
Okay,
If that's okay.
sure.
All right. So I chose this because I in the progression of things here, there is horizontal alignment, which can be left justified. It can be centered. It can be right justified. There is vertical alignment, which can be at the top of the cell, in the center of the cell, or in the bottom of the cell. And then there is this text wrapping, which can be by default is overflow, which means if that's what this is. This is overflow. If there's nothing in these cells out there to the right, then it will just use that space. But if you put data in there, then it won't. It'll just get truncated. Another option for text wrapping is this is overflow. This is clip, which means it gets clipped whether there's data in there or not. And the last option, the one that's most useful, is text wrapping. And oops, I have to choose the right cell first. Where am I at here? Wrapping will wrap the text. And that's especially useful for things like headings and stuff like that. So text wrapping, when it's wrapped, it'll wrap the text for currency rounded. Okay. Martha, anything else about text wrapping that you wanted to cover?
No, I didn't know how to access it that way. I always go down through format, but thank you for that.
Okay. And so remember what I said, everything here on the bar, you can do from the format command. There's text wrapping, there's text rotation, which we didn't get to yet, but heck, let's do that. If you want to, you can say format text rotation, tilt up, tilt down, stack vertically. Oh, what happened? That's interesting. Was that, oops, I don't want to copy it.
It's still there somewhere.
Yeah. All right, let's try this one. Format, text rotation, tilt down, or you can, here is text wrapping, text rotation, you can tilt it up, you can stack it. That looks really weird. Anyway, stack it down there. That looks better. I don't know what happened with stacking up. That looks strange. So
Did you skip over merge cells?
I did skip over merge cells. I was not going to cover that. Can we do that next time? Or do you want to do it now? What do you want?
Doesn't matter, but
Go ahead, stick with your program.
Okay. Yeah, again, I rarely use it. Jay, I guess you use it all the time. I'm not sure. Merging cells is essentially, especially if you want to give well, maybe not especially. If you want to give a heading that covers both of these cells, somehow you can merge some cells without changing the entire column width. If I don't know what happens if I merge these cells. If I choose these
no, you
two
can't merge two cells with data in them.
Okay, then let's skip merge cells because I'm truly not prepared to talk about that.
Okay.
I thought we would do it later.
I'll touch on it next week.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I think that's it for formatting. Most things you can do either on the format menu or in the bar. The only thing I know that you cannot do in the bar that you can do on the format menu is you can underline. There is no underline here in the bar, okay? The only thing I know that you can do in the bar only, that's not in the format menu, is you can change the font size, but you can't change the font. The only place to change the font is here. Other than that, they are duplicates. Pick whatever you like, okay? And I am also not going to talk about inserting links or inserting comments or inserting charts or filters and we'll talk just a little bit about functions really fast. I don't know how I am for time. So to talk about a little bit about functions, I just want to open this expense spreadsheet. This is really one of my real spreadsheets. It's my 2019 expenses for my business. The only thing notable about it that I want to touch on is a sum function and also freezing, freezing columns and rows. So this one is, I've got, it's organized by date. I've got dates down the side here. I formatted my date as this 26 March 2019. If I type in a date like today, or well, 5/17/19, I type it in that way, but it gets formatted the same way all the others are. So that's, again, a matter of formatting. An item is whatever it is that I'm paying for or whatever the expense is. The vendor is who I'm paying. And then these categories are things that my accountant tells me he needs for filling out, Schedule C for my income taxes. So just other than that, there are no formulas. There's nothing in here other than way down here at the bottom where there are summations. This is a sum function. And what it sums is from D2, it sums from D2 all the way down to the cell right above it. And what that means is, I'm going to click out of there. If I add, as I add more cells, if I've got a lot more expenses in November, if I add cells or add rows, it gets adjusted automatically. The formula adjusts itself automatically by going all the way from the top to the bottom. Anything I add in the range will adjust the range. If I add something outside of the range, it'll keep it outside the range. But all of these are summations. And it's just summing from that particular column on up to the top. So suppose that some new category came up, and I tried my best to think of a new category that might come up, and I came up blank, but just suppose there were one, I could, if I don't know why my dictionary keeps opening, apologize again. I can right click, I can insert a new column to the right, and this is
How about miscellaneous?
something new. Miscellaneous would be good too. This is something new, whatever it is. And if I go down here and suppose in November, I could put a date in here, but suppose in November, I have $500 of something new. Notice the way I did this, I added a new column, but I don't have a summation function. So I can do one of two things. I'm going to show you both ways just to show you how to make a new function. So if I click in here, I can choose functions over here, or there's other places to choose functions, I'm sure, but I can insert a formula, insert a function, okay? But right here, sum is used so often, it's right at the top. Sum, average is used a lot, count, max and min. There are so many functions. There's engineering functions, there's date functions, there's financial functions, I can choose a sum and it fills it in. It put in the equal sum, and now it's looking for a range. And what I want to do really is just, I'm going to go back up to the top of that January and select that cell. And I can either drag down, or since it have to drag past there, I'm going to go down to here, hit Shift key, choose that. It's summing G2 to G49, hit enter, and there's the $500. And if I had another expense someplace else, it would add them all up, 550, okay? So that's adding a function kind of from scratch. And notice, by the way, this is another sum function. This sum function sums out along here. It sums all my categories to give me kind of a grand total. And notice it also adjusted itself, because if you remember, when I started this, I should have pointed it out, but I only had up to Q because I didn't have this something new column. But when I added the column, I added it within that range. And so it automatically adjusted out to the new column. And so that kind of took care of itself also. Another way that I could have added that new sum function would have been, if I delete it, would have been simply to copy it. I could have taken any one of these other ones, taken the one right next to it and said Command C, put it in here, Command V, and it would adjust. This one sums column F, the one that I just copied automatically sums column G. So it's really very easy to work with, copying formulas, inserting new formulas, and lots of things kind of take care of themselves. But you need to be careful. You need to double check, because things take care of themselves until they don't. And then all of a sudden, your data is only as good as what you put into it. So be careful when you're adding formulas and changing formulas, but basically it really does work pretty easily. The only last thing I want to point out here about this is notice how when I scroll, my headings stay the same. My headings just are frozen there, which is nice. So when I want to know what this 2225 category is, I don't have to scroll back up to see it. Maybe I should have my dates stay the same so that I know when I put this 203.52 in. And that's easy peasy to do. It's in the view menu and it's freeze. And I can freeze no rows or one or two rows or up to the current row, which is row 50. I can freeze no columns or one column. I want to freeze one column. Notice the gray bars are down there now. And now when I scroll left to right, the dates stay the same, the headings stay the same. So that's a nice feature. And you can do as many rows and columns as you want. It just doesn't have to be the first one. I think that's all I have. I already pointed out there is no saving in Excel. Everything we've done is saved. Okay. So I'm done. It is 7:26. I've taken most of an hour. Sorry, I thought I could do it in less, but if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them. Jay, I don't know whether you're interested in jumping in and doing, I don't know if we're ready for more or not. It's entirely up to you.
Who do we still have here? Do we have Leanne and Helen still here?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I was on speaker.
I think I need to digest this. I was like,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Whew.
I agree.
But I
Okay.
really appreciate seeing what some of those symbols mean. I mean, a lot I didn't even know. I
Well,
use
the other
bold
thing
and
is-
underline, and that's about
Right.
it.
And Helen, almost always, if you just hover your mouse over something, it gives you a hint of what it is. Okay. And
Right.
by the way, Jay sent me a really good link to some Google Sheets tutorials and YouTube channels. So Jay, do you mind if I send that out to people? Because
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I
That's
think that's really worthwhile. Jay,
When I get stumped on something, I go look it up somewhere. I Google search what I'm trying to do.
right, absolutely.
Because this is real, these spreadsheet programs are fairly complex, and it's beyond any one human being to know everything you can do with them.
Right. So the intent of these three series is this was for the beginners. I'm sorry that we didn't have, well, maybe everybody else looked at that and said, I know this stuff. Hopefully that's the case. The next one will be a lot more about formulas, a lot more about some of the advanced features. You can autofill. Remember when I made that column of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a suggested autofill. There's lots of ways you can automatically insert series of numbers or series of things. So there's still much more to learn. So come back for the second one.
And there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the third one that we intend to have is going to be on SQL and scripts and script, a little bit of programming or scripting language. SQL has become the universal language of databases, but it's very, very powerful. Jay uses it, an awful lot in the labels programs and the accounting, the treasury programs. Very powerful stuff. And scripting we can only touch on because it really requires, it is writing computer programs. But we can touch on it and, let you, maybe what your appetite is to what the power of this stuff is. There's a lot of power behind programs. So that's the intent.
Well, thank you so much, Vince. I think I know Excel decently well as a beginner, but I learned a lot of things here too. So this was really good.
Okay.
I'm going to stop recording now unless anyone has a question that would be useful to.
Keep recording till we're done.
Okay.
All
And
right.
then I'll send this out to everybody as soon as I get the link.
All right. I agree with Helen. It's a lot to digest.
It is.
But it was great. Thank you. I mean,
Thank you very much.
wow. We need to play with this. Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly. And don't forget, you can always undo.
right.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good night.
Yes, thank you
Good
so
night, everybody.
much. I
Good
really
night.
appreciate it. Good night.
All right. Jay, thank you.